Today I'm going to show you exactly what you need to pay attention to when you look at an in-body scan so you know exactly how your body is changing. So first off, there's four main things that we're looking at. Now, when somebody first takes a look at an in-body scan, they're just going to look at the weight, and the average person is going to make a decision just solely on that information. But as you know, you can't just look at your weight to gauge your progress. You need to look at so many other variables. And the in-body scan gives us a little bit more information to be able to help us decipher how our body's changing. So the first thing I look at is, number one, I look at the weight and I see how it's changing. Now, if our goal is weight loss and we see that the weight is going down, we probably can assume, hey, that's probably a good indicator that things are going in the right direction. Now, before I even look at anything else, I want to also get some understanding of how consistent have you been. And so when you rate your consistency on a 1 to 5 scale, and if you're anything under than a 4 out of 5, if you're under that, you probably need to assume that these numbers might not be in the direction that you want it to be, just based off the pure consistency to results relationship. Now, going into more detail, after we look at that weight, we need to look at some other things so we can see how things are moving. The first one is our body water. So this is going to tell us how much retention our body is going through. So a lot of times our body's going to be holding on to water, whether maybe we didn't pee, maybe we had a lot more sodium the day before, maybe we were drinking some wine, some alcohol, whatever it might be. Our body can retain water. Now, this whole system works off of hydration levels. So in the perfect scenario, you would be under the same circumstances, meaning you drink the same amount of water. You do this on a day where you typically are eating around the same amount of things, because you want your body to have similar conditions. Now, that's why if we do this really well, we're also doing daily weigh-ins or frequent weigh-ins at home, so that way we can have another tool to use. But nonetheless, we look at the body weight and we decide, or the body water, and we decide, and we just take note of how it's changing. The next thing we're going to look at is our skeletal muscle mass. Now, this skeletal muscle mass is going to tell us, did we put on muscle? And essentially, we want to see that number is increasing over time. We can assume that this number will go down a little bit every now and then. But we try to get less than a 25% reduction over the course of your weight loss journey. So our main priority is to build muscle and to keep as much muscle as possible. And as we lose weight, we will fight off that muscle loss. And the main things we do there is we want to make sure that we are getting enough protein and we're not under eating massively to create a big disruption in our body composition. Because the more muscle that you have, the easier it is for you to look exactly how you want to look. You're going to have more definition and tone, but you also will be able to sustain that, because muscle is very metabolically demanding, so you need calories in order to sustain it, which means that we can eat more food and still sustain our weight without running the risk of gaining a bunch of weight when we go into more of a lifestyle phase where we're sustaining our weight. So we're looking at our muscle. We also are going to look at body fat mass. So this is kind of the inverse relationship. We want to see that, obviously, the majority of what we're losing is body fat, and that's going to be a big picture to it. And then the last thing we're going to look at is body fat percentage. So we want to see, based on our weight, how much of our weight is fat. And this is going to shoot out a percentage. Now, you're also going to see a lot of different kind of ratings here, like under, normal, over. And so for our women, we typically are trying to get somewhere around that 20 to 30%, and that will be a healthy range. You see the quotations, healthy range for our women. So for our guys, we want to see that body fat percentage somewhere between 10 to 20%. That will be considered healthy range. So when we look at body fat percentage, our goal is to start moving into those thresholds, and then we figure out where we want to sustain from that. Now, just to recap, some things that you want to pay attention to is you want to look at your weight, but we want to not only just make a decision based on the rate. We want to look at 4 specific things. One is our body water, how that's changing over time. Our skeletal muscle mass, are we increasing it? Are we losing too much muscle? We want to look at body fat mass. We want to see, are we losing the right tissue? And then we want to look at the thing as a whole. How much of our weight is fat? And make sure we're getting closer and closer to the ranges that we just talked about. Now, some common things that'll happen is, number one, sometimes you're going to come in here and you're going to be, let's say if you're a woman, you're going to be on your cycle, or you're going to be the week before your cycle, and that's where we're going to see a lot of water retention. And so all of your numbers are going to just be like they're just going to be really off. And so during those periods, we need to understand that our body's going to be retaining more water. If you see your weight is up, you really need to dive into the details of what's happening. If you see water weight's up and your weight's up, you know the majority of that is probably coming from water. If you see your weight is up and you see muscle has increased and fat has decreased, that's perfect. There's really nothing we need to change in that scenario. So our goal is to look at those 4 measurables, see how things are changing, and then you can talk with your sensei to figure out what the next steps might be. But now you have the information you need in order to look at this in-body scan and understand what's happening.